Sometimes, if you want to see clearly, you have to look through a funhouse mirror. Welcome to the depths. Hello, welcome or welcome back to Reading from the Depths. My name is Lecton. Thank you for spending some time with me today. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about surrealism and surrealism as an artistic mode of expression. And what got me thinking about this is I just finished this book, Odd Body by Rose Keating. And this is a phenomenal book. This is a collection of 10 short stories, and it's actually her debut collection. She's written some short stories that have been published elsewhere. This is her debut collection. She's an Irish author, and all of these stories are disturbing and unsettling and surreal. The first story, the title story, is about a young woman who has a ghost, and she's haunted by this ghost who follows her around. And other people can see this ghost, and other people have ghosts as well. And it's fine to be haunted by a ghost, though there are procedures that maybe you should look into to get rid of it. It's fine to be haunted by this ghost as long as it doesn't cause a problem for others. And so when there are some ghosts that start putting up a scene at the workplace, then that person, has to be reprimanded in some way. That's the title story. I mean, the way it opens is so beautiful. The opening section, the opening paragraph to it says, "You like the ghost a lot. You think it's good company. It's chatty and charming, and it often makes you laugh. The ghost has excellent taste in French absurdist cinema, and it enjoys listening to ska from time to time. The ghost is a good listener. The ghost doesn't mind that you like to gossip. The ghost has a real knack for crossword puzzles. You do wish the ghost would stop encouraging you to kill yourself, but you know that it's intended in a nice way. It's not that I want you to die," the ghost says, floating its Monopoly piece 4 places. "I just think it's important for you to try new things." That is the kind of writing that this is looking at. The second story is about a young woman who is taking care of her aging father, but her aging father is a 1 meter long earthworm that lives in the bathtub. Another story called Pineapple, one of my favorites, is about a woman who is in a new relationship, and from the outside it looks like a really wonderful, kind of perfect, ideal relationship, but we get the sense that she has some sort of sense of loneliness, and to help kind of cure that, she offers her body as a canvas to an artist who does this experimental body modification as a form of art. And so the first time she goes and sees this artist, the artist removes a big section of her stomach and replaces it with cat fur. And for a week, she lives with cat fur instead of a normal stomach. And then after a week, she puts her stomach skin back, takes the cat fur away, and does something else to modify her body. And it builds off of that. So what all of these stories do, and what surrealism or hyperrealism both do as modes of storytelling, is they take what is expected and just go slightly off kilter, right? They just twist things just a little bit. Obviously, this isn't new. Surrealism has been a major type of artistic expression, for centuries. Even just sticking to literature and or film, we can look at Kafka's Metamorphosis as this, incredible surrealistic piece of literature. If you're looking at film, anything by David Lynch would be surrealistic. Ionesco and the Theater of the Absurd. Recently I read a trio of plays by Clive Barker, and that really reminded me of the Theater of the Absurd. These are all kind of jaunts into surrealism, right? Or hyperrealism, again, would be a specificity to actions and behavior that is exaggeration of reality. You can think of like drag performances. A drag performance and a drag queen is performing a exaggerated idea of femininity. And that is what drag performances are. So that's a type of hyperrealism. You can say in the same way, any Wes Anderson movie is a type of hyperrealism because the specificity with which those characters act and behave is so distant from what we consider natural or normal, right? In the same way, a recent example would be the Barbie movie. In Barbie World, in the Barbie movie, is a hyperrealistic and exaggerated experience of reality. Or in literature, maybe Ian Reid's Thinking of Ending Things is another example of like a hyper-realistic relationship to emotional distress and how we engage about reality. So hyperrealism and surrealism are both kind of two sides of the same coin, where they look at reality and they twist it just enough to expose its vulnerabilities. And by exposing those vulnerabilities, you're able to learn something new. There are 3 things about surrealism and other similar modalities, artistic modalities, that I think are really powerful and that I've been thinking about. The first is that it's like a Trojan horse. It sneaks up on you. Whatever ideas or themes or concepts that the artist is trying to explore, they don't do it explicitly, right? They come at you from the side. And because of that, you might be facing things that you would be uncomfortable facing normally, but because they sneak up on you, all of a sudden you have to wrestle with them. So for example, is this a story about a young woman who's haunted by ghosts in public? Or is this a story about a young woman who has the experience of society telling her that she has to control her emotions and that her emotions are too scary and loud, especially for men, and that if she wants to be a productive member of society, she needs to learn how to control, her wandering uterus? Like, what is this story about? It sneaks up on you. It gives you one thing so it can tell you something else. And because of that, I think they're really powerful. It lets you look at things that you may not approach otherwise. And then in addition to that, or building off of that, they force you to think. It forces you to do the work, right? With this book, almost every story after I finished it, I had to sit down and go, what did I just read? Like, what is happening? What was the point of that? What was the author trying to get across? What did I take from it? Are those the same thing? Sometimes they are, sometimes they may not be. So it forces you to do the work. It doesn't give you all the answers. So when you're dealing with work or art that is separated from your expectations of reality, then what happens is you have to engage in a critical process of analysis, both of yourself and of your experience of that work, to try to make sense of it. And that action of doing the work, of doing investigation, of trying to think on whatever this artistic endeavor may be, it, it offers you an opportunity to learn something new about yourself, right? You're not being just fed the answers. You have to do the work yourself and then build something, right? It creates a habit, it creates a muscle, it creates a new way to understand your reality by looking at this skewed version of reality. So then building off of those two things, that there is this Trojan horse aspect to surrealist art, and that you have to do the work yourself to understand some sense of meaning from that art. Then there's the third thing, which is that this gives you an opportunity to face those things that make you uncomfortable. This gives you an opportunity to lean into the things that frighten you. And the reason I think that's important is because I think comfort is deceptive. I think comfort is stagnancy, right? Comfort, it limits your vision, it limits your scope, it limits your goals. Resting in comfort all the time, it stops you from growing, it stops you from transforming, from changing. It is stagnation is what comfort is. And now I understand that the world is distressing. And so sometimes people are seeking out a comfort read or a cozy read. And I'm not, this isn't a diatribe against any of those things. The world is distressing enough. Sometimes we don't need to be challenging ourselves in our private lives because our public lives challenge us enough. I understand that. I appreciate that. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that type of artistic expression. But I do think there is something about not settling for comfort all the time and trying to seek out things that make you uncomfortable, seek out things that unsettle you. If you just accept the status quo, then I think you are limiting your potential for growth. The status quo, standard operating procedure, or, social expectations. I think these are all kind of paternalistic fetters that really, at the bare minimum, should be questioned, if not actively rebelled against. At the very minimum, you should be investigating them. You should not be acquiescing to them blindly. You definitely shouldn't be celebrating them. The idea of celebrating the status quo is, so anathema to my way of being. And I think that surrealistic fiction or surrealistic art forces you away from the status quo. It forces you away from comfort. It forces you away from what you think you know. By taking this slanted version of reality, by having a skewed vision, by, having everything just off kilter, just a little bit, what it does is it exposes the vulnerability that's inherent in comfort and the way that comfort itself, or expectations, social expectations, status quo, all these things have this vulnerability of pulling a wool over your eyes that make you blind to your own unrealized potential. That's what happens if you just give in to comfort, give in to the status quo all the time. And so any art that can push you out of that can force you to look at those things that make you uncomfortable, that can force you to places that you wouldn't go otherwise, that can bring up ideas or thoughts or themes that you normally wouldn't approach for whatever reason, I think is powerful. And it's enjoyable as well. Like, that's the other thing. Like this, reading this book, it wasn't like a homework assignment. It was incredibly enjoyable, but it was also unsettling. It also made me think. I had to put the book down after every story to think about it. There's only 200 pages to this book. There are 10 stories. So 200 pages, 10 stories. That means they're long, short stories. Yeah, it took me over a week to read this book because after every story, I put the book down and I said, what did I just read? Like, what was the point of that? And how did that make me feel? Like, why do I feel the way I feel? To read that section I read you, like, just after that section, I had to put the book down. This idea of a ghost saying to you, it's not that I want you to die, but I just think it's important for you to try new things. It just hits you in a way, or it hit me at least, right? It forced me just to stop and say, what are the terms of engagement that I am playing with in this story? And how is it so wildly different than what I'm normally used to? And why does that make me so excited? Why am I so excited to lean into this thing? So I really think that, there's a whole Buddhist philosophy idea and Buddhist psychology about trying to avoid worldly activity and trying to engage in those things that we would identify as spiritual practice and not worldly practice. And worldly practice I won't go into a Buddhist sermon on you here, but worldly practice is anything that is really focused on the self-cherishing mind. Anything that is mediated by the mind that says, my happiness is more important than your happiness, my comfort is more important than your comfort, I am more important than you. And therefore, anything I do with that as the motivating factor is going to be a worldly action. And if we want to engage in a meaningful life, we should be trying to avoid worldly actions and engaging in either super worldly actions, we might call them, or spiritual actions, which are actions that are centering others' happiness, right? And so what that, for me, and how that relates to this in my engaging in art and in fiction is that I'm looking at things that support the status quo and I'm saying, how is this benefiting me or benefiting others? And if I can find something that disrupts my sense of the status quo, either by rebelling against the status quo or showing flaws of the status quo, or just saying these things that you grab onto as if they're providing you comfort are doing so at the expense of others. Anything I can look at or experience that lets me see that in a new way is exciting to me. It gives me an opportunity to engage in an internal practice that is more powerful than if I didn't have that opportunity. And I think art that uses surrealism or hyperrealism or other modes of creation that are, sideways to what is normal, what is expected, what is comfortable, are powerful ways to force me to look at my own actions and my own mind and the way I relate to the world around me, and to see if I'm doing that in a way that is supporting others or is at the expense of others, right? It Trojan horses these ideas into my brain that I wouldn't be exploring otherwise. So it forces me to look at things in a way that brings new understandings of reality because it doesn't display reality the way I expect it to. It goes against my expectations. So for that reason, I think, this kind of art, this kind of modality of expression, surrealism, playing with your expectations, playing with what is real, what is not real. Why do you believe this is real or not? What do you experience as real or unreal? These are powerful ways to engage with art, and I find them really meaningful, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on them before I just keep rambling. So I'd love to hear what you think about surrealism as a type of artistic modality and expression, or hyperrealism, or anything on that spectrum. I'd like to hear if you have any recommendations of that kind of art, whether it be literature or film, or even, visual arts. And I'd love to hear your thoughts in general about what it means to use art as a way to lean into those things that maybe make you uncomfortable, that maybe make you unsettled, but by doing so, allow you an opportunity to grow in ways that you may not have otherwise if everything is just surface level. So how can this slipshod relationship to reality give you an opportunity to go beyond reality, to learn something new about yourself? I'd love to hear your thoughts about that and anything else down below in the comments. But for now, I'll say thank you for spending this time with me today. I appreciate you. Please be kind to yourselves, take care of each other, and go slowly.